think we deserve as much time as possible with our speakers, so I've just got two quick things to say. One, many of you probably remember Dan, who was a Rotarian with us for a couple of years. Great Rotarian, great fellow. And the other thing I want to say about him, here's a guy who is absolutely, truly living his dream. Living his dream. And he'll tell us about that. Dan Steinberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Rick. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces. I haven't been here for a while. Just a little bit of a background about me. I joined Rotary, probably 2013, and this was the eye of the financial crisis storm for me. I had just left a not-for-profit educational institution in Bexley that I'd been working at for a couple of years. I'd been in Jewish outreach probably for about 7 years total, and my family was growing, and it came to a point where I decided that I probably could make more money if I went off on my own. You know, not-for-profits are not well known for their lucrative opportunities. So, my family was growing, and I said, I took television and radio back in college, back in the dinosaur age, and I think I could probably just take a go and make videos for businesses. This was 2011. Videos were just kind of exploding, and businesses seemed to need videos for their web presence, and I said, that's what I'll do. I'll hang up a shingle, and I'll make videos for businesses. And I just kind of quit my job. I had 3 kids. I had one on the way, and I had no business experience whatsoever. Recipe for disaster. Don't try this at home. And, I tried everything that I could think of doing to drum up business. I made videos for free. I made videos for $100, and excellent videos, really good videos for these businesses to help promote themselves. But I just had terrible business sense, and I really had no idea what I was doing. So I started to go to networking meetings, and eventually I took some sales training with Doug, which was extremely helpful. But it was, without exaggeration, this was literally going to hunt my dinner every single night, trying to drum up business. And it was harrowing. It was the most scary, frustrating, confusing, maddening time that I'd ever been in my life. Literally wondering how I'm going to pay the mortgage in a couple weeks. And it was at that time that I joined Rotary. And I was here, and it was all that I could do to kind of put a smile on my face. I'd see sitting with all the accomplished business owners like yourselves and executives, and wondering, when's my time going to come? How long is it going to be? And I would sit there, and I remember at the time I was driving a 91 Camry. And I was so embarrassed to drive here with it that I parked it out in the back. And I'll tell you, you want to, when you're a business owner, you want to appear successful. You want to appear like you have an air of success about you so that you'll be attractive. People want to hire you. And it was very difficult to reach out and tell people, hey, I'm hitting a rough patch over here. I'm stuck. There's nothing I really can't figure out how to progress to the next step. And it took a lot of courage to do that. But precisely because of that courage, that I don't know where I found it from. It just, maybe when you hit rock bottom, I formed some very solid, strong relationships with people. And it was that honesty and that openness and that willingness to connect with people and be vulnerable and let them know, someone would say, how's business? And I'd say, it stinks. It really stinks. And from there, you can grow. And so, I'd meet with all these different Rotarians, and they'd provide me, they literally talking me off the ledge, and it was a time that I look back on very, very fondly. I remember sitting here hanging. I'd hang on the words of the invocation for just some support. The invocation would mean so much to me. And I remember Scott once said, he was reading the invocation, and he said, God, I asked you for what I wanted, and instead you gave me what I needed. And that really, really hit me deeply, because this was not something, no one wants this. No one wants to have to figure out how to make a living and struggle and open up and feel raw and exposed. But it forces you to acknowledge certain things. It forces you to really form close bonds with people and take a look at yourself. And it was at this time that I kind of made honesty my ideal. And I would sit in coffee shops, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And for sure, I probably should not have put anything on the web that showed that I wasn't being successful. But it helped. It really helped, and it helped other people. And I somehow, while I was writing, it helped me feel that if someone else is going to go through this and they can follow my path out of it, it will be worth it. So I wasn't just experiencing it for myself, I was experiencing it for the greater good. And I eventually wrote a book out of all this blogging efforts. It took me a couple months, and I wrote a book. And the book is called What to Do When You Really Need Money. And I'll tell you where the phrase comes from, because what would happen is, here's what would happen. My wife would say, this would happen, 3-4 times a week. I'd be off on a path. I'd say, you know what, I'm going to pursue this path. This is what's going to work, and I'm just going to stick to this. And she'd come up and she'd say, we really need money. And it would throw me off on a tizzy, and I couldn't focus, and it would make me feel despondent. I'd feel depressed. It crushed me, and it was so difficult to just move forward, to put one foot in front of the other, until I realized that it was a button that was being pushed. She wasn't pushing it on purpose. She didn't know any better. It was instinctual for her. She needed money, and we needed money. So I realized that it was a button, and if somehow I could elude this reaction that when someone says we really need money, or my own brain would tell me we really need money, and I'd panic, to keep it in check. And I figured out a system where I realized that it was my main issue was not lack of expertise or lack of skills or lack of a network. Really what it was is that my emotions were getting in the way. That every single time I felt like I needed money, that I entered into this scarcity complex, what would happen is that I would get thrown, and it would topple me for a couple days in a row, and I literally couldn't move, and I'd question, there was self-doubt, and there was resentment. I'd look at successful people, and I'd say, they're probably getting their money in unscrupulous ways, and I'm being honest, and how come they're doing better? And there was a swirl of this noxious mix of emotions, and I really needed to get away from that. So it started with opening up to people, like I was just telling you about in Rotary, and blogging. And then it started on this process of self-care, where I decided, I was eating terribly, and I was drinking also. And I wasn't an alcoholic. I have to break for a second. You know what the difference is between a drunk and an alcoholic? Anybody know? Alcoholics have to go to those dumb meetings. So I don't know if you could call me an alcoholic, but I was drinking a lot, and I was eating terribly, and my stomach was all in knots, and I wasn't exercising, and I wasn't sleeping. I was always nervous, and so I said, you know what? Even though I really feel like I need money, I'm going to pretend like I don't need the money. And I would go to the gym at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd start swimming and start running. And I changed my diet into a completely real food diet, no processed foods, no artificial colors, no dyes, no nothing. And I started taking time out to eat and to exercise and to sleep, even though it seemed irresponsible at the time. And one of the things that I did with the self-care was I started to listen to comedy routines. I would listen to old radio programs like Jack Benny and Abbott and Costello and things like that, and Jerry Seinfeld, and just a lot of observational comedy. And it would lift my spirits. It would literally give me that boost that I needed in order to continue. And I would listen to music, and I would listen to comedy, and I would stay away from the news like it was the devil. The news will drag you down like nothing. You think it's news, but you're just really seeing selective things, doom predictions in order to sensationalize, the news and to make you feel like the world's ending and keep you tuned in order to read more. Every time I look at the news, I feel like, what's the point? The world's going to end anyways. I still feel like that when I read the news. So, staying away from the news, eating properly, sleeping, exercising, listening to comedy. And the comedy was something that resonated with me a lot. And I'll tell you why, because my background is in television and radio. When I was a kid, I was just 19 years old. I don't know how it happened, but I landed an internship working for Saturday Night Live at NBC Studios in New York. And to tell you the truth, it was so unpopular at the time, I really had to weigh my options. I really wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. But I did it, and it was quite an interesting opportunity. And my highlight, it's for another time, but the highlight of that time, there were two highlights. One was I was an extra on the show on March 17th, 1993. If they ever air it, you can see me in the background. And the other one was I smashed a dodgeball in Adam Sandler's face. Not on purpose. He was hanging around with the writers, and he threw a dodgeball at me, and without thinking, I kicked it back at him, and I kicked it so hard that it smashed him in the face, and the whole universe went silent. I can't tell you how awful I felt, and I went home. I didn't even come back to the office that day. I was sure that my career was over. And it turned out nothing ever came out of it. But those are the two highlights. After that, well, I'll tell you what the reason those were the two highlights, because network television, I'm not sure if it's the same anymore, but network television was completely ruled by nepotism. So it was impossible really to progress over there. It was at least at the time, it was very, very difficult to get ahead. The best I could hope for, I really, I submitted writing samples, I did all sorts of things that I thought would get me ahead, and it was very, very guarded and very closed, and everyone was insecure. And at that time, I was living in Rockland County, New York, and every day when I would take the bus into New York, to Rockefeller Center over there, I was listening to a radio personality named Howard Stern. And Howard Stern was the king of New York radio. The king of, he was top rated more than the news, if you can imagine such a thing. If you're driving in New York, you're in a lane next to five other lanes. You're in the middle there, and you laugh at something. You look next door, and everyone's laughing. Everyone's laughing. Everyone's listening to Howard Stern, and that's how popular it was. And again, it was all the stars had to align. I don't know exactly how this happened, but I ended up getting an internship writing for Howard Stern, and this was a much smaller venture. Over here, we're talking about 4 people in a small radio station and a tight budget, and everyone counted. And I had just come from Saturday Night Live, so I was very nervous about rocking the boat. So when I had stuff to submit to Howard for writing, I didn't want to do it directly. I thought that was going to cost me my internship. So what I did, I actually faxed in something to him as a listener, pretending that I was a listener. And he used it. And then I came from behind the curtain and I said, it was actually me. And that was my ticket into the writing meetings. I ended up writing for Howard Stern and being on his New Year's Eve pay-per-view special in '94. I don't advise you to watch that. My wife doesn't even know I'm in it. It's pretty ribald. And from there, I was on kind of a fast track towards, I started doing stand-up comedy around New York City, and I really was on a fast track towards comedy. And it was at this time, I was 25, something happened, and I can't really explain it. There seems to be a pattern here. There's a lot of things in my life I can't really explain. But what happened was that I woke up in the middle of the night, and I said, I'm not really sure who I am. I have this image. I had a whole closet full of vintage clothes. I used to hound all the thrift shops in New York and had a really cool image. I had long hair and pinky rings and an earring. I used to wear these Beatle boots, and I was kind of a hip New Yorker, and I was like, built up this image and had all these friends, and for some reason I woke up in the middle of the night. I felt very sick, and I couldn't really figure out where my life was headed. And what ended up happening was I decided that I was going to take a trip to Israel. And I was a wandering Jew. I went at 25, I picked up shop, and I didn't tell any of my friends. I told one person because all my friends were comedians. And this is something that's very, for the first time in my life, something was very serious. And this was, with comedians, nothing's really sacred. So I couldn't really tell anybody. It was too personal. And I got on a plane and I went to Israel, and I didn't come back for 7 years. It was a short trip. It was a one-way ticket, and it ended up being a good stay. And when I came back, I was a rabbi. And I'd pretty much given up the comedy career. And I went into Jewish outreach. I knew how to study these ancient texts, and I was, I knew a lot more than most people. It's funny, the organization that I worked for, it was called the Jewish Study Network. This was in Palo Alto, California. And their motto was raising the level of Jewish literacy in the Bay Area. That was their motto. And I didn't get it right. And someone asked me what I did, and I said, I'm here to raise the level of literacy of Jews in the Bay Area. And someone said, most of the Jews that I know how to read. I don't know many illiterate Jews. So I was there, and I pretty much had hung up the microphone. I decided that was, this was my more mature path now, and jokes were jokes, and that was nice, but it just wasn't really a purpose for living. And things have a weird way of coming out if you suppress them. And what ended up happening was that I would sneak out a couple times a week to San Francisco, and I would just put on a baseball cap. No one knew I was, was a rabbi. And I would go out to San Francisco, and I'd go to these comedy clubs and just do comedy again. And this time it was clean. My comedy answered to a higher authority this time. It wasn't, this is post Howard Stern, and it was really invigorating. And I said, there's this part of me that I've never really been able to reconcile. And in 2008, we got downsized because of the recession, and we moved to Ohio, and we came here, and we did basically the same thing, Jewish outreach, right before I left and started my own business, which I told you about earlier. And this was something that like I said, I never really reconciled, and it wasn't until this financial crisis that I started listening to these comedy routines, and I said, hey, this is who I was. This is not just uplifting my spirits. This is not just invigorating to lift me out of depression, out of financial crisis, but this is also there's something that really strikes a chord over here. And I would listen to it, and I said to myself, I think I left something behind. I left a piece of me behind, and it kind of took this crisis in order to realize that I was somehow incomplete. I was fragmented. There was this life of me before I went to Israel, and there was this second life that I was living afterwards, and I never really, except for conversation pieces, I never really meshed those two parts of me. And while I was listening to these comedy routines, I said, you know what, I see that it lifts my spirits up. Maybe I didn't respect humor the way that I really should have. I thought, well, hey, it's a joke, it's not a reason to live, but I see what it's doing for me right now. Right now, it's helping me not jump off the roof. I mean, I wasn't going to kill myself, but it literally gave me vitality. It helped me put a smile on my face and push through the day. And I said, well, if it's doing that for me, and I used to have this talent, this power, then maybe I should pursue it again. And it took a while, it took a couple of years till I finally got all the pieces into place. And you know what it was like? This is the best metaphor that I can give you. It was like a stroke victim learning how to talk again. It took years. It took a year and a half, day in and day out, of me listening to old comedy routines for half an hour, 45 minutes a day, until I finally felt like, oh, I got it again. I got it. I got back on the bike. I can do this again. That's how far I had gone from my original love of comedy. So here I am. I was working for this legal tech startup. Things fell into place, and it got sold. Got sold last year. And I said, uh-oh, it's time to jump to the next lily pad. It wasn't so pleasant the last time I was self-employed. What do I do now? And I felt like somehow the whole world was waiting for me to jump back into comedy somehow. And what I would do is, as the sale was impending of this company that I was working for a year and a half, I would wake up early in the morning at the synagogue where I prayed every morning. And I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They had a stage with a curtain and a microphone, much like you see this over here. And I would and there were empty tables and chairs, and I would practice an act. And I would just practice an act in front of nobody until I felt like I had a good half an hour worth of material in front of people that I had never performed it in front of anybody. I'd never tried it out. But I said, I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to invite everybody I know. I'm going to rent out this synagogue hall. I'm going to fill these seats. I had done this act 100 times in front of nobody. I'm going to do it live in front of real people now. And I sold tickets. I got food. I hired a caterer, and actually made money, more money than I'd ever made doing comedy. I made, I think it was $561.35. And it was because I paid myself, because I produced my own show. I didn't wait for someone to hire me. And I did this act, and it was a grand slam. I mean, if I can pat myself on the back, it really, I hit it out of the park. And I said, there's no going back. This is, you know, I'm complete now. I understand, you know, the power of, I respect the power of comedy. It's in its proper place. You know, it's something that I got to use for the good now. And so that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been up to since over the past year. Slowly doing more corporate work, stand-up comedy, sometimes mixing it with an inspirational message like you hear right now. And it's been fun. It's you know, I'm living the dream, right? Living the dream. I mean, this is. It took me a long time till all the pieces finally fit into place. You know, life is a journey, and there was a lot of shakeups in between till it finally got to that place. But I really feel, you know, everybody's behind me. My wife is behind me. My kids were doing a report, and we were talking about occupations. And so I saw in the paper, you know, Daddy tells jokes. And I felt good about it. I felt really good about it. You know, this is something I can be proud of, because I know how it can help people, and I know that it helped me, and I have a knack for it, and I feel like I'm complete for the first time in a long time. And I'm not rich from it. I'm not famous, but I feel like I'm complete, which is an incredible thing. Not a lot of people feel that. So let me see. How are we doing on time?
Well, like 8 minutes.
8 minutes? Should I tell you a couple of jokes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me slip into my. I'll come down. Okay. I've got a couple of minutes. So here was the first joke that I did when I got on stage for the first time after, you know, close to a decade. Take it or leave it. I said, you know, I ran into somebody yesterday that I hadn't seen for a while. And he was different. He was chipper, and he was chatty, and he was just a joy to be around. And I was telling a doctor friend of mine, and he says, "Oh, he's probably on medication." That's a weird thought, right? Like maybe he genuinely improved himself, worked on his personality. Nah, he's on medication. He's taking drugs that alter his brain patterns and turn him into a nicer person. But 75% of the population, my doctor friend tells me, is on some of these prescription happy meds. 75%. Do you know what that means? You know those rare situations where someone gets in your face or curses you out or just flies off the handle for no real reason? They're the normal ones. 75%. That means your friends are on these drugs and you don't even realize it. You're not friends with your friends because they got bad personalities. You're friends with your friends' drugs that turn them into likable people. Bob, I'd like you to meet my friend Prozac. I think you know his understated wife, Zoloft. 75%. If it wasn't for these prescription happy meds, this whole country would look like the Middle East. You want peace in the Middle East? Send them drugs. Forget about the 2-state solution. I call it the 2-milligram solution. So my wife and I have been married for 14 years. And my parents got divorced after only 7 years. So when we rounded year number 8, I said to my wife, I said, honey, we could get divorced tomorrow, and I'd still consider our marriage to be a success. Not the most romantic thing to say to your wife on the eve of your bronze anniversary. But, you know, it occurred to me, we view anniversaries very differently. My wife sees anniversaries, you know, like I look at each year as a testament to our undying love for each other. My wife sees anniversaries as leverage in her arguments against me. We've been married 11 years, and you would think that it's okay to buy me a scale for my birthday? Hey, I'm doing the best I can. You should have seen what I put back on the shelf at Lowe's. I knew my wife. I guess, she thought she knew me. Marriage it's a unique opportunity for two individuals over the course of a lifetime to discover how absolutely little in common they have with each other and still want to stay married. It's mind-boggling. It's so subtle. The fighting words in marriage are please and thank you. If you're having a conversation with your wife and you hear the words excessively being used, please and thank you, congratulations, you've just tuned into a fight already in progress. Will you please move your car? You're blocking me. Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's amazing how husbands and wives, they can take the most polite phrases in the English language and turn them into these like poison-tipped arrows at each other's hearts. Good morning. I hope you had a good sleep last night. Your turn. Ever get that one? Your turn. It's after 14 years, we don't even articulate our arguments to each other anymore. Instead, we do like the elections. Instead of saying to my wife, I can't believe you shot me down like that in front of our guests again, I say, I thought we had an understanding on issue 17. We've got about 14 recurring issues. Marriage is a lot like politics, isn't it? There's a lot of lobbying just to get your basic needs met. Women don't understand why men don't spend more money on them. It's not because we don't love you or because we don't want to. It's just ethically we're forbidden from giving gifts in excess of $500. All right, I'll leave you with this. This is one Midwestern. We've been living in Ohio 7 years. And one Midwestern institution I'm still trying to wrap my head around is the drive-through liquor store, the drive-through alcohol store. Wouldn't you want to stagger these two steps apart from each other? Just a little bit of a buffer between the driving and the drinking. Drive-throughs are for things like banks or fast food restaurants. Who needs alcohol so badly they can't be bothered putting their car into park? Okay, I'm going to take it down to about 2 miles an hour. You stick your hand out the window, grab the goods, we'll be driving and drinking in no time. But then I realized it's brilliant because whenever is there a time that you can't be bothered physically entering the liquor store? When you got a lot of kids in the car with you. Carpool, perhaps? Precisely the time that you get hit the strongest with the urge to drink yourself into oblivion. What are you going to do? You can't cart off a bunch of 10-year-olds into the liquor store with you. Enter the drive-through liquor store. It's fun. It's easy. Bring the whole family. And that, if you think about it, all the pieces of the drive-through establishments fit together now like a beautiful puzzle. You got a bunch of whining, obnoxious, fighting 10-year-olds in the back seat, and you just snap. Just completely lose your mind. Drive up to the ATM, take out all your money. Drive up to the fast food restaurant, stock up on food. Drive up to the liquor store, stock up on alcohol. Drop off the kids, drive off into the sunset, happily ever after without ever having to stop your car. Ain't nothing gonna break my stride. Ain't no walk-in liquor store gonna hold me down. Oh no, I got to keep on driving. Okay, enjoy the rest of your week, people. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for coming, and we're adjourned.